This is the Infinite Receiving Podcast, helping conscious leaders tap into a wealth of abundance across all areas of your life and business. I'm Susie Ashworth, and I'll be sharing with you how you can upgrade your reality through quantum transformation, because you are ready for infinite receiving. Hello, gorgeous. I'm so excited to share this interview with you. I can't even tell you exactly what it is, but I just love it. I loved this conversation. I was speaking to Jeff Walker. I aged him a little bit by calling him the grandfather of launching. He is. I've been following his work for the last 10 years, so since I was in business, but he has been in the industry and arguably responsible for creating much of the online marketing industry that you now directly and indirectly follow. This is a conversation about online marketing, about launching, about being a pioneer, about thinking in the right way to create continued abundance and success. And it's in a very he's just a very cool dude. So I hope you love this. Please let me know your feedback. And without any further ado, let's get on with the episode. Hello, you gorgeous human beings. It is Susie Ashworth here, and you are listening to the Infinite Receiving Podcast. And I have got a juicy one for you today. I'm really excited, actually. Not that I want to embarrass my guest. However, this is a gentleman. Yes, I said a gentleman. So this is rare, but not completely unusual, but definitely rare. A gentleman that I have followed for the whole of my career. And so it is really quite amazing to be able to introduce you. I'm going to say your name in a minute, but introduce you to my guests. I had the pleasure of meeting this man in New York in September. And the things that struck me about you were, one, your openness, two, your generosity, three, just this real aliveness in your passion still, which is quite incredible, bearing in mind the amount of time that you have been doing this work. So, not to age you, but this man is known as the grandfather of launching. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff Walker.
Thank you, Susie. I'm looking forward to this. And I didn't realize you've been following me. Like when we met, you were just like, oh yeah, whatever, chill. I didn't. This is great.
Yeah, I started my business 10 years ago. And so really your work and your presence has been around since then. But how long have you been doing this? Because it is longer than me.
Yeah, it's a long time. So I started my first online business in 1996, and I spent about 8 years in that business. And I realized that I was pretty good at marketing and specifically putting together promotions and launches. And so I started teaching launches in 2005. Actually, had a few people I coached in starting in 2003. Then in 2005, I came out with my program. Product launch formula.
Over 20 years specifically on launches, which is pretty crazy, because there will be people now that are buying your program that will only been alive a very short period before you started.
Right.
What were you doing before then? How did you?
Yeah. In another decade, we'll be in another decade we'll be able to say they weren't even born yet.
Which is pretty insane.
First came out.
What were you doing before then? How did you get into the online world and marketing?
Well, I was a stay-at-home dad. I was in the corporate world. Got in the corporate world, out of college. Wasn't terribly successful there. Couldn't quite figure it out. Really didn't like it. And when my wife we had our son. My wife was just getting out of college, out of grad school. She got a job, so my son was a year old, and we're like, well, my job. I hate my career. I don't want this. I'm not good at this. I'm not thriving. So I left my job to stay home and take care of my son while my wife supported the family. And so that was back in the '90s. It was a lot less common than it is now. I was definitely stepping out. Yeah, I was very much stepping outside the norms of society at that point. And then a few years later, we had a second child. My daughter was born, and so I was home with my two kids, and my wife, she had a good job. She was supporting the family, but we were just barely scraping by, frankly. And my wife came to me and said, "Is there some possible way you could, if you could figure out some way to make like $10,000 a year, it would help support it. It takes so much pressure off." And I was like, "Okay, yeah." And so I started thinking and turning that over in my head and trying to come up with a way to do it. And at that point, I had a big passion for the stock market. I've been studying the stock market, investing and trading. And I was also early online, like really to research the stock market and to meet with other people who were really into the stock market. And this idea of publishing online came to me, like publishing an email newsletter really is what I started doing. And that's what I started in August of 1996 was I sent out, a very, very simple text-based email newsletter, and it was free initially. And that first edition went out to, I like to say it went out to 19 people or 19 email addresses, because one of those email addresses was my second email address and one was my wife's email address. So it was 17 people outside of my home got that newsletter, but it started to grow by word of mouth. Back then, one of the great things back then was there was very little competition. Someone's like, "You're going to send me a free newsletter, and it's actually pretty good, and that's amazing." So it started to grow through word of mouth. And then, 6 months later, I was like, "Wow, maybe these folks will actually pay for an enhanced version." And that's when I put together that first launch, which I didn't consider it a launch. I didn't know, Susie, I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't know anything about sales. I was very uncomfortable with selling. When I think back to who I was then, I think I'm very much the same person, but I had certain mindset issues and certain skills I didn't have back then. And because I was scared to ask for money, I thought these people, you got to realize at this point, I've been home taking care of the kids for like 5 years. And I had nothing going on in my life other than a great wife and great kids. I had nothing going on in my life. Anyone looking at me from the outside, I'm now in my early mid 30s, and they'd like, this guy's just does. There's not much future here, and but like I was like, okay, I really want to come out with a paid version of this newsletter, and I want these folks to keep on loving me, because they when I send them a free newsletter, they write back and they tell me how great I am. And so I started to like up the romance. Like I gave them more and more really great stuff that led into me finally feeling okay with asking for the order. And that was in January of '97 when I sent, and that first launch was so simple. It was just email, because that's all we had back then. We didn't have social, we didn't have video, we didn't have audio, we didn't have podcasts, we didn't have blogs. There was no YouTube. There's nothing. And so I sent out an email. Eventually it said, "Hey, I've got this new version coming out. If you want to get it, print out this email and send me a check." And Susie, Susie, I said that the benefit, the positive of starting a business back then was there was almost no competition. The negative was that the audience was much smaller, and the technology was like to take online payments. That just took me months and months and months to figure out. I didn't figure that out until well into
Yeah.
1997.
Fax me a
So
confirmation, please.
exactly, it was just, in fact, yeah. We actually did. I offered the newsletter via email, but for people who didn't have email addresses, we would send it via fax. That was a little. It was
Ah,
early days. But then, so this is the thing. So that, Susie, that first launch, the first launch, which was, romance, send extra special reports via email, and then ask, do you want to get this enhanced version of this newsletter? And that launch did $1,650 in sales. And everyone has a different frame of reference on money, right? Everyone wildly different. But for me, if if I could have done a backflip at that point, I would have. I mean, I was so thrilled because at that point, no one had ever given me money for something I had created in my life. I'd only gotten paychecks. I'd gone to jobs and gotten paychecks. And the idea that I could create something and I could tell someone about it and they would give me money for that thing was just mind blowing. And it was like that was the success train is leaving the station right now, because like it really literally from the very first order, it was so empowering, and such a radically crazy thought that, I mean, the first person who bought from me was from Switzerland. I'm sitting here in Colorado, with the two little kids running around at my feet, and in a homemade desk, and I'm like, someone's going to send me money from Switzerland. He sent me a check. This is ridiculous. And here, so that one of them, that was that incredibly empowering thought. But then another thing is that I had this thought that I did that once. I made $1,650. I did that once, and I'm going to be able to do that again. There's no reason I can't do it again. And I might even get better at it. And that's what happened. Is like, 3 or 4 months later, I put together another promotion for basically the same product, but I created a bonus, enhanced the offer, and I put together a launch for that. This is the second time through, so it's always easier the second time through. And I made some tweaks. And one tweak I made was responsible for 4x in the result. So I went from $1,650 to just over 6,000. So it was almost 4 times the result, which was insane. And that one change was that I put a deadline at the end of the promotion. I didn't leave it open. And so I'm in that promotion, and the sales are tracking just like they tracked on the first launch. They're going, the first day there's X number of sales, second day X number, and just trickling along. And then on that last day, the sales just spiked. They just went through the roof on that last day because of that deadline. And it's like, okay, I just learned something there. And now I can't make an offer without putting a deadline on it, because I know most people procrastinate. Most people are like, they want to put off making decisions, including me. And so, I mean, I think when you put a deadline on your offer, you're actually doing a service to the person that you're making that offer to. Because it's like, if you have something that could possibly change your life, something of super high quality, something that will really enhance their life in some way, that will take away some pain or deliver some pleasure to them, and you are not making a powerful argument for something that will do them good, then you're doing a disservice to them. We can talk more about. My thinking has changed quite a bit about that idea of value exchange. Back then, I thought people will hate me if I ask them for money. Now I realize it's like, if you have something, a great offer for them that is, and you're talking to the right person, it's like your sacred duty to do well in making that offer, to put it together in the right way, and to put a deadline on it, so that you walk them up to the precipice of making that decision. And then, then it's like their decision, one way or the other. But, you've left it all out in the field.
I am curious about your wife's response to the first launch. Do you remember how she felt?
So, because I now, have coached thousands and thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs, and starting, some very successful, some that are just starting out, I know that having a supportive partner or a supportive spouse is not something that everyone has. And I am blessed that my wife Mary has supported me 100% of the way. So I can't remember. Let me just give you an example of her support. Is that there's a whole second track in that second half of 1996. And I know this is ancient history, and I'm sorry, folks, if I'm boring you with this stuff, but it's crazy town in that, like, I started that newsletter, and I also decided, as a second path, I didn't know where that was going, but a second path was, I think I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to go to graduate school. I'm going to go get an MBA, and then I'm going to be able, which shows you, Susie, just how bad my thinking was. Because if you think about it, how I got there in the first place was I didn't do very well in the corporate world, and here I was going to go get an MBA so I could go back into the corporate world. So it was a little messed up thinking, but we all have to start somewhere. But anyways, I was working on getting into grad school, and part of that newsletter, that free newsletter, was I was going to put that on my resume to help me get into grad school, because otherwise I just had 5 or 6 years of taking care of small children, which doesn't necessarily get you into MBA school. And that first week when I did that first launch, that first week of '97 when I did that first launch, I also went. I went to my first class because I was accepted. I got into that first class. I was in that first class, and this is graduate finance, graduate level finance. And I'm sitting there listening to the lecture, listening to the professor lecture. I'm looking around. I'm like 30, probably 30, whatever, 33, 34 years old, 35 years old. All everyone else is like 25 years old. They're a lot. I'm like the old dude. They all just look different. I mean, I've got 2 kids. I'm married, and it just doesn't feel like I fit in this classroom. And I'm listening to this professor go on and on and on and on. And I'm thinking about that $1,650. And I'm thinking about where this business could possibly go. And in the middle of that first lecture, I got up and I walked out. I just quit. I'd spent 6 months trying to get accepted and get in. And I got it and I quit that first day. And I went home. So now I go home, and this is when, if you think about it, this is when Mary would be like,
Yeah.
what the hell? But she was like, I walked in, I'm like, you know what? I see the path, and it's not going back to school and going back to corporate. It's whatever this thing is, this that starting to feel like a business. And she was just all in, 100% all in behind me. So she had faith in me when I don't think anyone else did.
I am.
And it's been amazing.
Well, I
Yeah.
was just going to say, the start, even though it is back in the day for you, is interesting for me because I'm having conversations with a lot of my female peers and clients who are retiring husbands, and the husbands are looking after the kids, and they are the people that are creating the courses and doing the launches and going out and being the portal for exponential wealth. And it is challenging, that dynamic, and going against societal norms. And so yeah, I'm really curious to hear your perspective, because you would do it now. It's kind of way more common, and we're now talking about this dynamic is a little bit like weird. And I know that you have worked with our mutual friend Denise Duffield Thomas and her husband in the business, and she's talked very openly about how that dynamic is strange. I'm just curious about, what was it like being the house husband for that long, and also then making the transition back into being, I think also the second launch, like after, like 1,650 was like the tester, but then when you 4x'd it, what was going on in your mind? Were you like, okay, now we're back in business? Or yeah, I'm curious about all of that.
Yeah. So first of all, it was very different. Being a stay-at-home dad, being the primary caregiver back then. I didn't know any other men that were in that role. I think most of the people like that were at, say, our education level, they just thought it was freaking weird. They couldn't figure out, like, I committed this career suicide. um, they I did have one friend. She's like, you're just retiring. You got something big coming. But most of them were like, we almost didn't want to talk about it. It was so strange. And but we were doing great. Mary and I were doing great together, and our kids were doing great. And our kids are amazing. They're adults now, and they're just stunningly amazing kids. And so it was like, I just don't really, we didn't have that many friends. It was hard to make friends, because I think a lot of people, like, the friends came from either work or from your kids' friends at school. And I was just like an odd man out, because all of my kids were with their moms, not their dads. And so it was strange, but it all worked out really amazingly well. I can't believe the story that I've led. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, and then that second launch, when that thing hit, it was like, if you think about it, it was, if you add those two things together, it was almost $8,000 and my goal was $10,000 in a year. And like in about 4 months, I was at $8,000. And there are a few other revenue streams coming in as well. And then I just started to project. I was like, wow, if each launch, if we grow at this pace, I'm going to be like, the numbers get crazy pretty soon. And so, we were just all in. Then there's a few more launches that did that, that $8,000. I think we had one that was like 12 or 14,000. That was just amazing. But mostly we're doing these 2 or 3 times a year. But then in 1998, I came up with an idea for a completely a complementary product. It's sort of a different product line. And that one in the summer of '98, that one did $34,000, which was right about as much money as I'd ever made in my life. And I just did it in a week. And that was when Mary and I started talking seriously about her leaving her job. And yeah, that was so it did. I mean, it was started. It was about 2 years to get to that point where, okay, this is real. This is growing. This is now a track record of 2 years. So now, yeah, it's time to figure that dynamic
You
out.
said you didn't know anything about sales, you didn't know anything about marketing, you didn't really know anything about the online world. Where was this knowledge coming from?
Well, what? So I am a Susie. This is something you might not know about me, but I'm a huge community builder. I love community, and it turns out I'm really good at community. But back in the early days of the internet, and even before the internet, there's these online services, and it was a smaller world, and there was a real feeling of in many areas a real feeling of community, and I really dove deep into that, and I think that led into a lot that taught me how to speak to audiences. Like once I started to, that newsletter went from 17 people to 30 people to 60 people to 100 to 600 to, eventually got to 80,000 people were getting that newsletter, that free newsletter. But I think that being really enmeshed in the community helped me figure out how to talk to people in conversation online, which, and back then it was just email. So that was a part of it. The other part of it was, well, there's two other parts. Is I realized that somehow I realized that online business and online marketing was very, very similar to the old school, like direct marketing that was done via snail mail. And there's a history of that going back into the 1920s. So when I realized those two things were similar, I went back and I started studying that stuff, studying because there's people that have been teaching how to market direct sales via snail mail, via magazine ads. People have been teaching that for a long time. So I went back and studied that stuff and said, how do I take this stuff into the online world? And then, so I think that gave me a huge leg up that I was very, very early on in realizing that. So, like, what makes a great headline right now is the same thing that made a great headline in 1930. And you can go back and study that. And the language has changed a little bit, but it's a direct analog. And then, almost no one was teaching online marketing, but I got this email for this product called Turn Your Computer into a Money Machine, put out by a woman named Sheila Danzig. It sounds unbelievably cheesy, ridiculous, but I actually bought that product for $99.50. And we wouldn't be talking here right now if it wasn't for that product. It came on a little floppy drive, a little 3.5-inch floppy drive, and I went through. And it was very short. It was very simple, but it gave the basics of copywriting. It gave the basics of like having people join your list and then being able to sell to them. And yeah, that I would not be here if I hadn't spent $99.50 for that. And yeah.
I love all of this so much because I think that one of the things that holds people back in my world is this idea that they have to have the newest idea or the most original idea. And what I hear from you in terms of your learning, actually, it wasn't original ideas. You applied old ideas in a new way. And actually, when I think about the start of my business, it was taking hypnobirthing. So, how to have calm, positive births, which at the time the market was dominated by kind of slightly crusty, kind of earth mothery, knit your own knickers. And I just took the concepts and applied it to modern women who were working in the city and drinking champagne at lunchtime and who were not so earth mothery, i.e., me. And that created a whole new wave of, well, one, other hypnobirthing courses, but really it actually was my first contact with Hay House, because I wrote a book and then they picked it up. But it wasn't a new idea. It was just reimagined and delivered in a new way. And so I think that that's really, really important for people to hear, is that success leaves clues. And obviously this is what you've made your whole freaking business on, is sharing those clues.
Absolutely. I think a huge part of this world right now, and it always has been, and this is actually one of the early realizations for me, was people are after connection, and they're after resonance. And when I started my newsletter, it was about the stock market. It's a fairly serious topic. It's which at the end of the day, it's money. It's a serious topic. I had no credentials. I had no letters after my name. No one had ever heard of me. I'm taking care of a couple of kids, but I geeked out on this. I went and I'd studied the Wall Street Journal going back 100 years, and so I had a perspective and I had a voice. And what I realized early on, and maybe it was like the Wild West of the internet was such the Wild West back then, that new voices were welcomed. At least it seemed to me they were. And I realized that if I tried to sound like a big company, I tried to sound like I was at Morgan Stanley or something like that, I would sound like everyone else. And sounding like everyone else is just a recipe for disaster. And no matter, for people who are just starting out now, no matter where you are, what you're doing, what your topic is, you have a unique you. You have a unique perspective, a unique lived life, a unique knowledge, a unique way of expressing it, a unique way of how you of your voice, your literal voice, but the words you use, and that is what people are going to connect with, especially early on in your, when I say early on in your business building. And in fact, it's an advantage early on when you have a small audience. Right now I've got what I consider, hundreds of thousands of people listening to me, and by definition, your connection with them is not as intimate. But when you're starting out, when I had those 17 subscribers, the universe knows that you've got this smaller audience, and they are just going to be more connected. Everyone wants to be the someone that got on board early, and that's the way your early followers are.
The thing is, actually, I'm nodding my head, but I think that that's another really important golden nugget, because one of the mindset traps that people fall into is thinking, I don't have enough people and I'm too new. So to hear you say everybody wants to be somebody who gets on board early, I think is really powerful and potent for people to take on board. Really important.
It is. It is. And I see this empirically. It's one thing to say that, and it's like, we all have that innate sense of that. But because of my role in the industry, I've gotten to see inside hundreds of launches and promotions and businesses, or thousands probably. And what I know is that smaller lists, and when I say a list, that means your audience, and it could be on social, but I always want you to move it to email, because email you have more control over, and it generally, for almost everyone, gets better results than social on a per person basis. And when you look at like what a list of 300 people or 500 or 1,000 people versus a list of 100,000 or 200,000, yeah, the 200,000 person list will outperform the 300 person list, but on a percentage basis, that 300 person list, well nurtured, will blow away the bigger list. That's just empirical. It's just the way the list universe, the world
What
works.
is the smallest number of people on your email list that you would recommend somebody launching to now in 2024?
I think I think 100 or 200. You could 100, 200, 300. I'd say in there, absolutely, you could do it. I mean, you would want to build an offer that leverages the fact that you have a small list. And because when you have a small, you can do things like you can reply individually to people, right? You can make offers where you offer small group calls or even one-on-one calls. I can't do that. That ship sailed for me about 20 years ago, where my audience got to the size where I can't reply individually to people. I, there's just no possible way. I can't offer one-on-ones with people. There's no possible way. But if you have 100 people on your list, and at that point, if you're just starting out, and maybe it's just you got an email list of 50 people and 200 people on social or whatever. Your first goal at that point is just to make an offer, to get an offer out into the world so you can start to get feedback on that offer. So if people buy it, then you can start to deliver to them and you can start to build results for them. So it's all about baby steps. Baby steps it's something I talk about forever. I've been talking about that. It's just like you got to figure out the next small step. If you're just starting out and yeah, you hear me talking about 100,000 person list and you're like, I could never do that. I might as well not start. That's the wrong thinking. The thinking is how can I build the smallest audience possible that I can make an initial offer to, and that offer will often be for like a small group, cohort where you do live calls with them, small group calls, teaching whatever you're going to teach. And I'm making a lot of assumptions here that we're speaking to people that want to be teaching or consulting or have a course or a membership site or something like that. So that's a big leap. If you've got a widget or something like that, it's a different game. But most, 80% of my clients are in that world of what I call the wisdom business, where we're sharing knowledge and information. And if you're in that type of business or you want to get there, it's all about getting that first group, that first small cohort together so you can start teaching and you can get good at teaching and good at getting transformations for your people. Because in the long run, that's what's going to win for you. And Susie, as an example, when I shifted from this business about the stock market to teaching about marketing, so that was in 2005. I really started that transition in 2003, but it really happened in 2005. And I made an offer for something that I think I called it the product launch workshop. And I had six people buy that from me. And I had some friends that I knew would be interested in this, but I still felt bad about asking them for money. So I comped them in. So I got about 20 people into that group. So 6 of them paid and the rest of them came in for free. Important lesson: the people that got in for free ended up not even really showing up and doing the work. But the 6 people that did, they showed up, did the work, they got results. I ended up interviewing them. They became my case studies, and then I was able to take basically in teaching to them live on calls. Actually, this is before we could do stuff like we're doing right now. They were actually telephone calls. They were on bridge lines back in 2005. But I learned how to teach launches. I already knew how to do them, but I didn't know how to teach them. So with those 6 people, really the 20 people, but really the 6 that paid, working with them, I learned how to teach launches. So then when I came out with my course a few months later, then I had case studies. I had the knowledge of how to teach. I had the knowledge of how to structure it. And that launch, actually, because I had a whole bunch of, it was a new business, a new market, but I had a whole bunch of partners that I'd helped over the years who told people about it. And that launch did $600,000
Whoa,
in a week. Yeah, that was the first start. The first launch of Product Launch Formula was six hundred thousand
that's
dollars in a week.
crazy.
So yeah, that was crazy. But and so that's October of 2005. So to get to $600,000. I mean, if you did the math, it took me 9 years to get there. It took 9 years. So none of this is like overnight success, but it's just moving the ball forward, moving the ball forward, moving the ball forward. And so, since then, the numbers have gotten crazy.
Crazy, yeah.
I mean, I've I've had many days. It's still a glorious day, but many days where I've done over $1 million in sales in a single day. I had one time where I made over $1 million in sales in 53 minutes. We can go back in our shopping cart and look at those kind of crazy stats. But so now that I've sort of overwhelmed people with big numbers, the thing to remember is Product Launch Formula. I guess I've sold about over $100 million. My students and clients have done over $1 billion in sales, but that started by doing a class with 6 people. 6 people. I've had now a million people go through my free product launch training. The numbers are just crazy, but it started with a class of 6 people, and that class started, and that success came out of that launch 9 years before. The most important launch for me that I've ever done is a launch that did $1,650. Yeah, I mean, it might sound crazy to compare that to a launch that did $1 million in 53 minutes, but without a launch that did 1,650, that nothing ever happens. It's that initial belief in yourself.
So the numbers are crazy, high highs. It started with 6 people. I am curious, or 1,650, should I say? In all of these years, have you had a bad year? And when I say a bad year, I don't mean a bad launch, but I mean an entire year that has been like, what the heck happened there? Or no?
Well, that's Susie. The great thing here is you're asking. I've been interviewed a lot, and you're asking a bunch of questions that I've never heard
Yay.
before. So this is wonderful. The way my business went is it's just been a series of steps up. Like, there was getting to that $10,000 mark. And then there was one little marketing tweak that sort of jumped it up to about the $80,000 mark. And that was great. And then figured out a couple of tweaks and I jumped it up to the $200,000 mark. And then sort of jumped to the million and then the 4 million and then the 10. So, but I would flatline, I flatlined at $200,000 for 3 or 4 years, and I flatlined at $1 million for a couple of years, and I flatlined at 4 million for 2 or 3 years. So there's been many years where I've sort of flatlined for a while before I figured out the next evolution. I would say the toughest year was probably 2022, bleeding over a little into 2023, because in my world, so like if you think about, obviously we had this pandemic, horrible thing for the world, an incredible thing for online business, and especially if you're teaching about online business. So I've went into that. We had a lot of experience doing virtual live events. We went into it with a strong distributed team that was used to working remotely. We were perfectly set up. I mean, the first month of the pandemic was sort of scary. We didn't know, but ended up being, 2020 and 2021 were amazing years for us. And then 2022 was the year that like things got a lot harder because there was so much more competition and ad costs have gone up, and a lot of the undercurrents in the business just made the business harder. We had grown our team quite a bit in 2021, so we had a bigger, everything I'm talking about now, it all sounds like the Jeff show, but it's very much, I've got this amazing team of almost 40 people that are really doing the work. So I would say that 2022 was probably, that was the toughest year. And I think we were down a little bit. We were down about 10% overall, but we worked really, really, really hard to get down 10%. So yeah, I'd say that was the toughest year.
How do you, when you've had a tough year like that, and you said it kind of bled a little bit over into 2023, I'm curious about the mindset of how you recover. How do you get beyond that didn't go to plan and now we've got to pull our socks up again?
Yeah, I think one of the things so like I mentioned earlier, I was big in community, and that's been a thread for my whole career. And I have these amazing communities. I have two masterminds, and I have this coaching program. So this the coaching program is called Launch Club, and then I have two different very high end masterminds with about 40 people in each, and I've had them for a long time. The one group we're in our 14th year. Many people who joined 14 years ago are still in it. So those two groups, there's about 80 people in those two masterminds, and we're in daily contact, and so. And then with Launch Club, we've got hundreds of people in Launch Club, and we're in very, very close contact with them. And so I just know that it's not just me. It's like I know this is right now that or 2022 was it was a rugged year for a lot of people just because of the big macro currents. And so the first thing was like, okay, it's not just me. So to me, that's like a comforting thought, is that it's not just me. Um, and then, I guess over the years, I talked about my thinking back in 1996. My thinking's, it's something I've worked on nonstop. Is the mental game, and just I know that we all create our own reality with the stories that we're telling ourselves. We're story making machines, and we're doing it 24 hours, well, probably 24 hours a day, but every waking moment we're walking around telling stories to ourselves. And you can either tell yourself positive stories that move you forward, or you can tell yourself negative stories. And so it's like, okay, well, this business, maybe the publishing industry is going to end now, but it's pretty unlikely. As I know, this Wall Street Journal has been published for 125, 130 years. This industry's got a pretty long track record, and there's just, I just have to. This is just a puzzle, and there's a lot of people depending on me. There's these communities, and there's my team that are depending on me, and it's like I can either sit down and cry in my soup, or else I can figure this out. And and I think if you look at business as a puzzle, or a game. It can be a heck of a game and a heck of a puzzle. And not every you just watch any sporting event, any professional sporting event, be it soccer or football or baseball or basketball or whatever. There's no team ever has a straight line to success. Even a championship team, in that season they had struggles. In that championship game, they had struggles, and that's just life. So yeah, I wouldn't say I was ever particularly concerned, at all. It was just like, okay, I've had some glory years. I've had a lot of glory years, and this is a year where I take all that experience and all those assets, and I put them to work to get through. And oh, by the way, this is when the weekends, the competition. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about competition. I think most people are. I think more people are more likely to be future partners than they are competitors. And yet, I do know that all those people that came into the market, they're not necessarily going to last. And so it's almost like that's the time to lean in. During challenging times, those are the times that true fortunes are made and businesses are built.
Oh, that was a little mic drop moment there. What I don't hear from you, and maybe this is just the work or the mindset work, the changing your thinking, but what I have personally experienced is that fear of, well, how long can this last? Like, I feel like the other shoe is going to drop. And I don't hear that in your thinking at all. Is that just a program that it just has never resonated with you? It's like, well, no, of course not.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. I guess. I mean, again, sometimes there are radical things that radically shift the world. They happen. I mean, uh, but the odds of them are rather remote. Something absolutely crazy is going to happen. But the publishing industry going away overnight is unlikely. Um, the internet going away could happen, unlikely. Um, and so, yeah, it's just. I mean, like I remember the Rolling Stones just released an album. They're 80 years old, Mick and Keith. Mick Jagger is 80 years old, Keith Richards is 80, and it's one of their best albums. It's their, in my opinion, as a bit of a Stones fan, actually a big time Stones fan, it's their best album since oh boy, 1979, 1980. So they just put out a really good album at 80 years old. And I remember like seeing an interview with Keith Richards when he was maybe 45 years old, so 35 years ago, and him saying, someone saying, well, how, you're like, you're in your 40s, how long can you keep this up? And he's like, well, my role model is like the old bluesmen, like, BB King, and and those guys played into their 70s and 80s. That's my role model. Why can't I do that? That's what Keith said like 35 years ago, and here he is living it. And I'm like, I just don't see things. Yeah, things can change. Things can change radically, but the odds are against the odds are that if you are creating great, it could be entertaining, educational, training, material, coaching that changes people's lives. That's always going to be in business. That's always going to be in style. That's People are always going to pay for that. Now I can't, I'll tell you, Susie, 30 years ago, I was doing it 100% via email. I didn't, there was no social. There was nothing. There was just email. So yeah, my business is radically different now. I never thought I never thought I'd be on camera. Where I'm doing a live interview. I never thought that would happen. I do these live broadcasts that are almost like TV quality. Never thought that would happen. But those are things that are, you just adapt as they come along.
How do you, I mean, there's just loads in there. And I want to invite everybody just to borrow this mindset. Like the thing that came across to me in New York, and the same vibe. Like there's just a voracious passion for what it is that you do. Like I feel excited by being in your presence, which I have to say is another, and whether I don't necessarily think this is innate because you said I never used to like sales, but I really want everybody to understand that it is this passion and excitement that sells without actually selling. And that I think it's really, really important for people to understand that the passion and the desire for people to understand and get it is very, very sellable. How do you stay ahead of the game? You know, because in my 10 years, you know how many times people have said to me, live launching is dead, live launching is dead, evergreen is dead, and this is dead, and that is dead, and this is dead. And at the same time, things are changing. So live launching is not dead, has never been dead in the last decade, despite the fact that I've seen many, many posts talking about it. But you have adapted and evolved. How do you stay ahead? How do you know when it's time? Talk to me about that.
Well, you mentioned I'm not a grandfather yet, but I'm old enough to be one. And I think part of being older is you just have perspective. And I grew up within this industry with a set of really great friends that I think, together with like about 10 or 15 of my friends, I think we largely invented much of online marketing, and we invented it together. And everyone in that group had just this crazy abundant mindset. And I took that wasn't natural to me, but I took that on, this mindset of just abundance, there is so much in this world, and we do better by growing the pie versus trying to fight over the pieces in the pie. And so I mentioned those masterminds I have, very, very high end. So, there's two of them, and they sort of split out by business size. And one's people that might be like in the, say, 400,000 to $2 million range, or $3 million range, and one's more in the like 2 million to 30 to 50 to $100 million range. And so I've got these two groups, and I'm in daily contact with them. That's, we meet 3 times a year, but I'm in daily contact with them via messaging, a messaging app, and via email. And those groups, when I started that first group in 2010, it wasn't because I needed to make money. I was looking to make money. I mean, they're not inexpensive. They're to get into these groups, but I didn't start it for the money. I started it because I needed a creation machine, and that has just paid off in an incredible level. So I've got those two groups, and we're just working together to invent and reinvent the next new thing. And I mean, I'm not always about the next new thing, because often the old stuff just keeps on working long after everyone's abandoned it. But it's more a combination of like what has worked and then what are the new tweaks. And those two groups have fed me in such a huge way. It's just it's like they're my research and development groups, and it's not like I'm just taking from them. I'm giving to them. That's what makes the groups work, is everyone is just giving freely, and they're in all kinds of different markets from all over the world, and all different types of business models. But those perspectives, that I think is what has kept me at the top of the game.
We're recording this in January 2024, so it's the new year, new energy. What are you most excited about for this year in terms of the online launching landscape?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me what I'm most
Okay.
excited about in my life.
I'll do that as well.
I would say, yeah, like the big change we made. So first was email, and then in the 90s and early 2000s, and then we got blogs. Using a blog was like a big innovation in a launch, and then it was ugly screen capture video. Then it was ugly talking head video, and then it was nicer talking head video, and then social came in, and then we started doing full cinematic, story driven video with b-roll. And then that was like 2014, 15, 16, we really pioneered that. And then starting in 18, we really pioneered doing live broadcasts in our launches. And that was an innovation, frankly, that came out of my Platt mastermind. Susan Garrett was the first person to do it, and she's like, "You should do that." And so we started doing it, and it worked in 2018. Great conversions, 19, perfectly set up for 2020. And so we were all live broadcast for our launches. And then in 2022, 2023, all of a sudden it got hard to get people to show up. And so last fall, the last few months, we started shifting back to using a lot of really beautiful video that then leads into the live broadcast. So the video delivers value, and it makes the argument for why people should show up on the live broadcast. So right now, what's working, and our launch did fantastic when we did that. We went deep on consumption, on working on getting people to consume the pre-launch content, and worked really, really hard on the show up. And so that combination right now of coming at people with all kinds of great training ahead of time, be it video, be it PDF, that then builds the argument and earns the show up for the live broadcast where you make the offer. That's the thing that's been working in the last 6 months, and that we're leaning into right now.
So, thank you. And now I need to ask you, what are you excited about in your life in 2024?
Well, I think this is like the what I'm excited about is so okay, I don't want the universe to listen right now, so close your ears, universe. But like I've done very, very well financially, and I it's been a number of years since I've had to work for money. I don't need more money right now. That's my apology to the universe. More money would be great, but it's been a lot. Our income, 10x and then 10x again, and our lifestyle really hasn't grown very much. And so we're very well provided for and will be forever, um, unless money stops working or something like that. But we're going back to those small odds of things happening. But in any case, so I'm not after business growth just surely for to make more money or business growth. I'm after business growth for to create impact. You mentioned how you think I come across as very passionate. I'm super passionate. I love wisdom. I love knowledge. I love books. There's books everywhere in this house. I love that, books are the treasured knowledge of mankind and of humankind. And, and what I'm doing is just an extension of that and online. And what I do is I enable other people to share their wisdom. So there's people walking around in the world that have dogs that are well trained because of me. Not that I know how to train dogs, but there's people that have meditation practices because of me. Not that I'm a meditation teacher. People that are better parents, better spouses, that can speak second languages, that can read echocardiograms, all because of my training helped other people get their training into the world. So that's like where my passion comes from. But I think, right now a lot of people are running around talking about 10x 10x business, 10x is easier than 2x, 10x. A number of people are talking about that hyper growth, and which is all great. But the path I'm on right now is this year is all about 10xing, not 10xing, just radically improving. How to say this? Doubling down yet again on the growth in all areas of my life. So I show up as a better parent, even though my kids are in their 30s. I show up as a better husband. I become a better athlete. My mental, my spiritual growth, every area. So I sort of that's it. Yeah, I want the businesses to thrive. I want to I want to set the business up to live beyond me. But yeah, just doubling down in all the areas of my life.
I love that. What you have just enabled us to segue into very beautifully is 6 questions that I ask all of my guests right now. What you just described is what I call the wealth trifecta, and your leverageable wealth is great, and you are doubling down on your intrinsic wealth and your experiential wealth, your experience of life, and then the spiritual piece, the inner world. And for me, it's when you have all of those 3 points of the triangle that you're working on and creating and growing, that is when we are truly wealthy. So that is a beautiful segue into Infinite Receiving, which is my new book published by Hay House. And the questions, quick fire questions that I have for you, Jeff, are first of all, when you hear the words infinite receiving, what does infinite receiving mean to you?
Let me think. So infinite receiving. Um, I think that I mean, we're just all blessed. We are all blessed with our next breath is a blessing. Um, we were given that somehow. We don't know how. Some of us have theories, but none of us really knows. And I think that, to me, like, I think that a very wise friend once said this to me, that um, none of this matters, and every minute is incredibly, vitally important. And I try to hold those two as I walk through life. And I've had meditation's been a very big part of my life for over 20 years now. And I think, at the best, meditation for me is it's bringing myself present to the present moment. And when you can, you don't want to always live in the present moment, but I think most of us spend very little time in that present moment. And I think when we're in that present moment and we're just truly aware of that moment and what a gift it is, um, that's infinite receiving.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. How good are you at being in that present moment?
It depends. Sometimes I'm okay at it, and sometimes I'm horrible at it. I'm just like everyone else. We all have our challenges and our trials and tribulations, and so yeah, there I can get carried away, just like everyone else. But I do know that it's almost always first thing in the morning when I meditate, and what that's what will bring me there. And then if I get that meditation in, and I do 95% of the days, then that'll help me tap back into that through as I go throughout the
Beautiful.
day.
Where in your life or who in your life can you allow to love you just a little bit more right now?
My wife, my wife Mary.
Noted. What is your greatest attribute?
Hmm. Greatest attribute. I think I'm kind.
What's one thing that you are consciously working on manifesting right now?
Um, I would say organization within my office. It's just, there's a reason I'm only showing you this half of it.
Final question. Where can you allow yourself to be more supported in your life right now?
Oh boy, where can I allow myself? So, allow myself to be more supported. Boy, I am so supported. It's absolutely ridiculous. I've got this team that just does anything they can to support me. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I'm blanking on that.
It's
I'm
good.
sorry.
No need for apologies. I've loved.
Yeah. No, I mean I have so much support. I mean my wife supports me in such a huge way. My kids support me. My team supports me. My community. It's. I think there's a reason that I've thrived, and it's because of
Yeah,
all that support.
I love that. It's one of the pillars of infinite receiving and that opening yourself up to infinite support. And there you have it. So thank you so much. I have absolutely delighted in this conversation today. So thank you so much for your time and your presence. I really appreciate you. And I would love for you to share with my lovely listeners where they can find out more about your work and product launch formula and all of that good stuff.
Well, first of all, Susie, this is a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it, and you asked lots of
Thank
good
you.
questions, and many of them I've never had before. So yeah, this is great. Thank you. You can so I productlaunchformula.com is a great place. I don't know what you're going to find when you go there right now because we're always testing and changing stuff. But what I can guarantee is, we'll try to get you to put your email address in, and then we'll send you really great training for free. And then eventually down the road, you'll hear about one of my courses. But there's always great free training available there. jeffwalker.com. I have a blog there. I publish videos there every week. That's probably the best places. I've got a YouTube channel, Jeff Walker CO. Or no, Jeff Walker CO is Instagram. Sorry about that. I'm all over.
Just type in Jeff.
I'm all over. It's easy to find me, Jeff
You'll
Walker.
find them.
Yeah, just go look for Jeff Walker at Google. You'll find me.
Thank you so much. If you have loved this episode as much as I have, do me a favor, please go and share it with at least one of your friends. And I love it when you tag me and tag my guests on Instagram. Let us know what your biggest takeaway was. And in the meantime, please remember that faith plus action equals miracles. Thank you for listening to Infinite Receiving with me, Susie Ashworth. I'd love to share with you my Infinite Receiving activation audio. Go to susieashworth.com/activate infinite receiving.